Well, the word jetty, right, like means a couple of things. Like in the context of the movie, it's referring to an airplane jetty, which is like a place where you would do the onboarding. You could have a jetty, meaning some kind of bridge type structure, right, to get to one place to the next. It could be, usually like islands and water, that kind of thing. You could also have a metaphorical meaning, right? I mean, this movie has this idea of like entering into something, right, to some kind of place. It could be forbidden, it could be something else, right? But this idea of like a passageway into something else, right? Connecting you, right here, perceptions connecting you to, perhaps ever more, fantastical thoughts. But anyway, this movie, what makes it unique is it's about, I think it's like 28 minutes long. And it's basically, for the most part, a series of still images, right? So these are photographs, and they are placed in sequence so that they do end up forming a kind of movie, right? It's not like a stop motion kind of thing for the most part. There's like enough time elapsed between shots where there's, a significant amount of motion that sometimes passes, but clearly sequential. You get lots of times like different elements being captured from shot to shot, even if it's like of the same subject. So earlier on we mentioned series and how artists could deal with the same subject again and again without becoming boring. That's obviously a lot easier to do in the context of a film, right? Because somebody like the viewer always expects to get, in a sense, like multiple little angles of like a certain subject or an idea, right? So this is like these discrete individual units like making up the film. And so the idea behind it is a boy, right? He appears on this airplane jetty. He has this like memory that he keeps returning to his entire life again and again, and he can't quite put his finger on what it is. There's a woman that he remembers, and there's perhaps some other things that he remembers. And soon after that, there's this kind of like World War III situation. It seems implied that there's nuclear fallout. So everybody goes to live underground, and this new kind of hierarchy, I guess, of like the new power structure decides on various experiments to send people back into the past, back and also at some point into the future, so to get some kind of technology to deal with their present state. Right. And one man is selected to do this because he has this attachment, right, to this one image from his past. And it is this image that we see in front of us. And eventually he goes through these experiments. He falls in love with this woman. He wants to stay there. He asks the people from the future that he meets, I'm going to bring this back to the present, but please send me back so I could essentially live my life with this woman. He gets sent back here, but it turns out that he is his own memory that he is so fixated upon, right? Because he notices this man at the end, right, that was sent from the past, or rather sent at that point from the future to kill him, right? And that's the man that is falling on the jetty, right? So it's this kind of loop, right, that kind of starts where it started, right? So that's kind of the conceit of the film, and the way that it does this is the way that I described. And one thing I'll just point out is, so many of these would be like great, photographic shots outside of the context of a movie, right?
Like that would be a very strong image gallery unto itself.
Yeah, exactly. Like something like this, right? I mean, this is, even if you want to call this like, oh, this is, like just mostly documentary style stuff. I mean, there's still, a lot that you could talk about, right? This is still distinctive. you have, you know, the portrait that we're seeing, something like this, right? There is like a bit of a naturalness to it, right? I said earlier that's something that is too obviously and overly staged, might not work. This is, you know, something that you could imagine, you know, like a celebrity photographer taking a photo of, right? Like, you know, the first lady getting on board, right? Air Force One or like whatever. You could imagine some kind of context like that. You have these interiors, right? When you go underground in the film, where it's, you know, it's kind of like it's forbidding, right? It's supposed to be its own kind of like a society unto itself. And you know, like there's a lot of like myth making and world building going on in the film, despite it being so short, right? It still does that a lot, right? Like shots like this, right? This is like one of the first, I believe, when you're told where the action is going towards. And, you know, as a portrait, I mean, this would be a great portrait, right? For many different reasons. And you know, like we were talking about like different tonal variety, right? We have light, middle, dark, the darkest being the shirt, the face having kind of elements of all. So like always lots of stuff that can be discussed. And here's the one photo in the movie that has she's this like you're tempted to say like this because the way the movie presents it is the protagonist has a memory of this woman, right? But this cannot actually be, you know, his memory of this woman because he's never seen her, right? Like he's you know, as a child, like he could not have seen her. These are not the context under which she would appear. Like she's supposed to be appearing in the context of the airplane jetty. But in this image, you see her blinking for, I think it's like 5 or 6 seconds, right? So it's like the only time that's like really continuous. I think you mentioned something about like some other ones having kind of like a little bit of a footage effect as well. And that might be true too. Here's the famous scene with the couple, right? They kind of like sort of become a couple at this point. And they are visiting this, like, I guess it's the equivalent of New York's Museum of Natural History with lots of animals that are kind of either animal models or they're stuffed. And it's a really great effect because here they are kind of like trying to build on this budding relationship, I guess, that they got going on. But, you know, they're essentially frozen in time. You know that they are because of the context of the film, like, you know, where they are in the film, you know, what their function is, but also just, you know, technically, right. Obviously, these are all photographs here frozen in time that way. But the animals are kind of even more frozen, right? They kind of like mimic what the human beings are doing, or perhaps the human beings are mimicking what the animals are doing, right? Because they have been frozen in time for thousands of years, right? If not longer. Yeah. So it's a really nice like confluence of factors, right? That creates like a new kind of level of, you know, texture and ambiguity in the movie. Well, anyway, I guess that's my introduction to Ligeti. I'm not sure if you have like what else you want to say about it, because I mean we have lots of notes. There's actually a lot that we could say about it.
Yeah, well, I have a couple things. So first, the style where, like you said earlier, each individual still frame is focused on for a few seconds at a time, so you do get a chance to take that in as the viewer. It is not stop motion. It is not flying by. It doesn't linger for very long, but you are able to fully take in what's on the screen with each new frame. And like you said, it does generally move along in a pretty straight ahead narrative way. The confusion or any sense of where exactly are we in time comes more from the narrative and the storyline and the voiceover, right? So that's another important thing. The drive in terms of us knowing what's actually going on is the voiceover narration, which is ever present throughout. It's very spare yet strong and poetic. You had a few lines that you pulled out from it specifically, as did I. And like, for example, time builds itself painlessly around them, is one line when the two of them are together at a park, and she's asking him something about, how is he still there, or how does he keep coming back? And the line that the narrator says is just, he invents an explanation. Right. Yeah. So it's just little, like, strong, short, sharp lines like this that make the movie, they really elevate it. Because you had asked me in your show notes, if there was no voiceover, would this still be a good or a great film? Would it work? And potentially, there's still enough there that maybe it could tell a story. Again, if you considered it almost like a photo book that's being showed to you in a slideshow, you could still say, oh, that's an interesting film. I'm getting a sense of what's going on. It seems dystopian. It seems odd, and like we're moving back and forth in time, and you'd probably figure some of that out, but it's really the combination of the two that makes it so powerful. To your point, the images are very strong all by themselves. I think one other reason maybe I was so drawn to Michael Ackerman's work, who we just talked about a few minutes ago as a solo photographer, is when you watch this film, and please watch it if you haven't watched it already. Again, it only takes 30 minutes of your time and you get a great film. The images, it's much more so when you see it on a larger screen than what shows up here as Alex is clicking through the image gallery, is a lot of the frames are dramatically in contrast, right? Yeah, I mean, that's a good example, right? It's complete pitch black and then a little bit of white light that's showing on some faces, or it's high contrast in terms of the film that it's shot on. It's pretty grainy and almost, destroyed and borderline grunge. And again, that's a nice touch because it contributes to the feeling of this post-apocalyptic place that we're in. But the individual framing, especially of the portraiture, is really wonderful. And there's some of the weird ones, right, with like the doctors when they've got those goggles on that are so strange looking and off-putting, and then there's the expressive ones and emotional ones of like the lead actors. And so all of that goes together really well. That one in the bottom middle where he's been shot out on the jetty as he's trying to run and finally be with this woman forever. This shot that's often used as promo for the film, period. And it communicates a lot all by itself, right? If you didn't know anything else about this film, if this was the movie poster or the cover of the DVD, you'd be thinking, okay, in some way, this is sort of a dramatic, potentially anguished film. What's going on with this guy here? And so by the time that we get to this frame toward the end of the film, it's a really excellent, close to final image, and the expansive sky behind him, and this promise of a good, even if technically untrue, artificial life that he could have had, and it disappears on this jetty. So anyway, just a really wonderfully executed concept, and certainly worth anybody's time. Even if you could read like a transcript of the voiceover narration, it reads like a really good short story or something.
Yeah.
You have it there.
Yeah. Just give people a sense, right? So this is the story of a man marked by an image from his childhood, the violent scene that upsets him and whose meaning he was to grasp only years later, happened on the main jetty at Orly, the Paris airport, sometime before the outbreak of World War III. So it's just very poetic, right? There's just like one part, right, where after they start doing the experiments on him to travel in between, different points in time, it's like they begin again. The man doesn't die, nor does he go mad. He suffers. They continue. On the 10th day, images begin to ooze like confessions. A peacetime morning, a peacetime bedroom, a real bedroom, real children, real birds, real cats, real graves. And I mean, and this is just like an example of great script writing, because I mean, like even just like just imagine what it's saying. We have this like build up, right, of everything is peace, 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 right, because it's a state of war in the present time. And then we go from peace to real, right, a real bedroom, real children. These are all supposed to be positives, right, real, as opposed to the artificiality of perception or of memory, or however you want to talk about it. But then we get like from real birds, real cats, then to real graves. Like even the reality of death is something that is welcome to him, right? After everything that he's kind of subjected to. And you don't even have to say all that much about the experiments, right? Other than, directly stating he suffered, right? Images oozing like confessions. This is another kind of like tonality, right? And then the relief that he feels in finally seeing real graves, like real death, because, suspended animation seems to not be preferable to that. So another like favorite scene of mine here. Let me just look up the word. So a girl who could be the one who he seeks. He passes her on the jetty. She smiles at him from an automobile. Other images appear, merge in that museum, which is perhaps that of his memory. So this idea of like this museum of memory and perception, we get a bunch, like when the experiments are happening, we get a bunch of images that look like this, right? We have images that look like this, like that. And these are supposed to be like, Roman or like Romanesque or like whatever statues, like some of them are crumbling. It looks like we're getting pieces of, the kinds of stuff that we could find in museums today. And the way that it's characterized is like, it's just like these ruined artifacts, right? That it's just like a good metaphor for not only memory, right, but specifically to perceptions that get kind of like rearranged, right? Because you always do stuff to memory, right? And you always do something with your perceptions. You build upon them, you allow them to unfold into fantasy, right? There's a lot of stuff that happens in between, and you have this like kind of like, center kind of a sequence with these pictures that really capture the logic of how all of that goes and how it works. Which was quite not nice. And nothing that I would say is like, even if these actors were like mediocre actors, I think it probably wouldn't have mattered as long as you had enough time to take enough photos. Because I mean, even with a mediocre actor, you will eventually have kind of like very naturalistic expressions and moments to be captured, even if they're not like even, like working on the movie, even they're just kind of like talking to one another or like whatever. You'll capture these kinds of moments. And in fact, I'm sure as this was going on, like a lot of these photos were not taken in the stage sense of like, okay, now I want you to do this or that because this is going to be this or that part of the movie, right? They could have just been like sort of preparing or standing around and boom, that's it. That's the scene. I got it. And then of course, other ones clearly are, probably going to be like kind of, more staged, you have like more things going on. Yeah. But, I feel like even with mediocre actors, with a good enough photographer or director, you would have had, like stuff like this that falls out purely by happenstance because, naturalism is just, it's just what human beings are, right? I mean, you would be able to get at it and also the undercurrents of this naturalism, simply with like enough kind of brute force time, right? So,
well,
I think
that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about. I think it just shows that great photographs can work, and it almost in a way does highlight how photography is still the foundation of cinematography, and the way that different directors develop a character to the way they do their films. But yeah, I'm just looking at my notes real quick to see if there was anything else, but I think that's pretty much it. Yeah, you mentioned earlier what I had said in my notes, which it's very subtle, but other than her blinking for those few seconds, there occasionally is like a tiny bit of motion in the frame, and it's not in any way the film rolling. It's just maybe some shake in the film, the way they put it together, or who knows what. But yeah, I mean, basically it's all still frames. Also, should just be said briefly, really the only music in the movie is this really dramatic chorus that's very it sounds like of a wartime kind of or like, it's probably, I guess look up exactly what piece it is, but it's probably pulled from like, a Passion symphony or something like that, right? It's very large and grand and dramatic, but that also is a nice choice on Marker's part, because it does contribute to the mood of this post-apocalyptic world, but it also just works well when juxtaposed like that. It's for the opening credits, and that plays in the background with this chorus like belting out this song, and really all we're looking at is a picture of an airport. Like, it would be kind of banal. It's probably one of the weaker frames in the whole film, like all by itself, but the credits roll and there's a frame of the airport. It's that first one right there. I mean, this is, there's nothing really to write home of. It's a fine picture, I guess. But,
even so though, like it works in the context of like, I mean, one of the narrative tricks, right, is like you're sort of like made to forget the initial, like if you read like Dan Schneider's review of this movie, like he makes the point that, you're sort of made to forget what happens, at the beginning versus connecting it to the end, right? Like it's supposed to surprise you at the end. And, starting off with just kind of like, if you want to call it banal or just like purely documentary style shot, that kind of sets that for you, right? It kind of like, you build off of that concept, like into the rest, right?
Yeah.
So